Alrighty, welcome to the 120 channel. I'm your host, Hayden Hudson. I'm an author, a writer, a producer, and also, I guess now a podcaster. I started this podcast so I could platform my books, but I also decided I am a storyteller and I like to video edit. So this here is going to be a story that is kind of near and dear to my heart because it's something I found out this year while Facebook scrolling and actually visited some of these sites this year. And that is going to be, of course, the story about the Battle of Blair Mountain, which is an incredible story with so much history that it was never taught in our history classes, at least none of the ones in college that I had or in my high school. So this is kind of a reach out to those forgotten pockets of history. But of course, with every major significant event that's ever happened in history, there's a fuse. And a fuse always sets off these chain of events. And the Battle of Blair Mountain is no different. You may be asking, where the hell's Blair Mountain at? Well, you look up on your maps, you'll find it's in West Virginia, not very far from the town of Logan. The fuse, though, that started this all, started off in the town of Mattawan, West Virginia, by a man of the name Sid Hatfield.
A Kentucky man from across the ford that was standing high. When the cold was bitter from the post-World War fatigue, he pulled those twin pistols, oh Sid, the smiling machine. Well, hold the line from Baldwin Felts, they sure don't give a damn. They take your soul from the coal and tell your dreams to scram. Oh, Sid stood for the lowly folks, he did what he thought was right. And when you listen down in Mattawan, you can still hear the fight.
Before I start going into the guy named Sid Hatfield, and you may be thinking Hatfield's McCoys, you're not far off, same area. We should probably talk a little bit about the coal mining culture back in the 1900s. I was a coal miner for 10 years in the surface mines, so not exactly an underground guy. Different animal, not that guy, I will admit it. But I've worked with them, and there is a certain respect you have to have for people that worked underground, and that's in today's society, let alone 100 years ago where safety regulations were not really a thing. So I'm going to explain a little bit about the coal mining culture and we'll go from there. Now, back in the day, a lot of these small towns in West Virginia and Kentucky, and I would even argue maybe southern Indiana, there were a lot of these coal company owned towns. That means they had company housing, they had company barbershops, company general stores. That means that the coal mine company owned all of this stuff, even your own house. And they didn't pay you in U.S. currency. They paid you in this thing called scrip. You look up the definition of scrip, and scrip is basically an alternative currency. You turn it in for another, but it was a little different back then. You can see right here. This here is scrip. You can see there's a stamp in the middle of it. And a lot of coal mines would put stamps in the middle of their coins so it would be identified into whatever coal mining region it was in. And you couldn't even, and there were sometimes you couldn't take that scrip and go to another scrip mine because it had a different company. So these coal mines owned everything about your life. Your whole life was owned by the company. You worked long hours. There's no safety regulations. I'll go through a little bit of those now. So as far as safety, back in the day, there was no MSHA, no OSHA. There was nothing like that. They passed a couple little laws, but, I mean, they had children working down the mines, 12-year-olds out there working. And some of the safety factors that went in were cave-ins, explosions, methane dust and gas, black lung, of course, long hours, and child labor. These were the contributing factors of what created the United Mine Workers of America. So the unions were formed, and this is the entire point to Blair Mountain, because it was the unions versus the company.
What are you doing?
Get bad. Better get bad, Jack. Bad. They don't mess with you. Yeah. Hey, home. Get down.
Another couple quick facts about the death rate that was going on in these coal mines. 20,000 deaths in a 10-year span from 1900 to 1910. There's also an incident that happened in West Virginia, not too far from where this story is going to be taking place. And it was, help me out, Google.
Years since the Monongah mine disaster killed more than...
It was that mine, where an explosion happened, killing 362 people, including over 50 children. That coal mining incident is kind of what set off a chain reaction to having safety regulations. And Union Mines had more safety regulations and was a lot better at creating a working environment for coal miners. Well, now that you kind of have an idea of what was going on in these coal mines, instead of coal companies giving a little bit more fair wages and trying to improve on the safety standards, I mean, that's where they would put their extra money in, right? Not so much. This is going to be the introduction now to the Baldwin-Felts Agency, which was a union buster, which means that they went in and they evicted miners that had become union without any kind of notice or eviction notice, nothing like that. It was very illegal, and who's going to stop them? A lot of these union towns, they owned the judges, they owned the cops, they owned everything. All for the idea of progress, of course. The Baldwin-Felts Company was started by a man named William Baldwin back in the 1890s or so, and it had a run up to the 1930s, but it's really got a high... It really had a high infamous reputation. There was 3 events that happened before the Battle of Blair Mountain that the Baldwin-Felts was directly responsible for, and of course, no consequences. I'll list them off very quickly, though. These 3 events was the Paint Creek coal strikes, and there was also the Colorado Coal Wars. In both of these instances, the Baldwin-Felts Agency even had their own armored car, would drive past in a train, and they would shoot tent cities full of miners evicted from their homes, killing hundreds of people. Not a thing was really done about it. This is something that is not ever talked about in history. They were using brutal tactics all the time, evicting miners and complete chaos. And this is where it's going to end up with the third event. And this third event introduces the man of the hour, the fuse to the great battle of West Virginia, Sid Hatfield. Now, if you go to the town of Mattawan, West Virginia, you're going to find a big, giant wall surrounding it. And you may think, wow, you hear the Battle of Mattawan or the Massacre of Mattawan or the big shooting of Mattawan. This was the OK Corral of the East Coast, Mattawan, West Virginia. If you see that big wall, nothing to do with that. It had to do with that being flooded back in the 1960s. It's really a cool part of the town. You can go to that wall today, and it's an incredible piece of history. I've walked around it in fall of 2025. Mattawan, West Virginia is located in Mango County, West Virginia. It borders right along between a mountain and the Tug Ford, or the river. And on the other side of that river is Kentucky. So it's right up against the border there. Now, right here in this region, it's interesting enough. When you read a lot about the Hatfields and McCoy feud, this is in that same area. There was even a significant event that happened across the river in Kentucky, right there near Mattawan. So it's a really historic place. But the most historic thing about it was the shooting in 1920. And this is where we intro Sid Hatfield. Now, Sid Hatfield, we don't know exactly the year he was born. It's within 2 years. But he was born in Pike County, Kentucky. His real name was William Sidney Hatfield. He was 10th of 12 children. He was, as a kid, a coal miner, so he understood the coal mines. And when he got out of coal mining, he became a blacksmith for a small amount of time. Later on in life, he became a lawman. He became the sheriff of Mattawan, which was a shocker to some people. It was a very controversial decision. Now, the Mayor Testerman, who's a big part of this story, was a very pro-union man, and so was Sid Hatfield. So I have a feeling there was an agreement there that they would protect the miners, which they did. And Sid Hatfield was known to be a little bit of a ruffian. He's not exactly a good guy, but he's not exactly a bad guy. That's how we kind of have to look in history at Wyatt Earp or Doc Holliday. They weren't really good guys, but they weren't really bad guys either. They had a code. They were within the law in a lot of ways, but Sid Hatfield is a controversy in himself, and this is even before the shooting of Mattawan, West Virginia. Now, you may be asking, how did that even happen? Intro now is Albert and Lee Felts. Now, their brother Tom Felts runs the Baldwin Felts operation. Now, Albert Felts was not exactly a fan of Sid Hatfield, thought he was a very wild card in this game. He's a very Wild West kind of man. Tom Felts felt in a lot of ways that they could bribe Hatfield into being in their cause, which kind of gives you to the character flaw of what Sid Hatfield was, not this most graceful hero. But even then, they kind of thought, it's a long shot even to try to bribe the guy because he is a pro-union man, and he is loved by the people, and he does like being liked by the people. He likes the camera work. It was on this day that Albert and Lee Felts decided they were going to start evicting some miners who decided to turn into the Union. Now, they did this without any kind of warning or any kind of eviction notice. It was against the law. They decided, well, we're the big bad Baldwin Felts group. We are. If you've ever played Red Dead Redemption and seen the Pinkerton Detective Agency, very similar to that kind of standard.
Hey, look at this.
What?
This necklace I made.
Necklace?
For Mama.
Sure.
What a fine young man. And in such complex circumstances. Arthur, isn't it? Arthur Morgan?
Who are you?
Yes, Arthur Morgan. Vanderlyn's most trusted associate.
It was on that day, Mayor Testerman and Sid Hatfield confronted these guys about throwing miners out and was asking the legality of what they were doing. Of course, they gave some kind of BS excuse, said that they got this warrant from this town, to which Mayor Testerman and Sid Hatfield went back, confirmed that that was a lie, went to go arrest them while they were going to arrest Sid. And here we go to a standoff in the middle of Mattawan, West Virginia. Now, this is right near the train depot and right near the hardware store, where Sid Hatfield slowly walks back into the hardware store as Mayor Testerman goes out and confronts the two Felts brothers. Now, here's where things get a little dicey, because at this point in time, no one knows who shot first or who shot where or who shot what, but all of a sudden, a hail of bullets erupted throughout the scene. Regardless of what could have transpired or what actually did, the one thing that was for certain was Mayor Testerman was shot and fell down first, and then Albert Felts was shot and killed. These were the first two casualties to this event, and slowly all these coal miners that had been holding back erupted with a force against the Baldwin Felts agency. This was 20 minutes of a gun battle that went over 100 rounds, and at the end of the day, 2 miners were killed, and the mayor later died that day. 7 Baldwin Felts agency detectives were slain, including Albert and Lee Felts. In the aftermath of this, Sid Hatfield became an icon for the Union movement in West Virginia and became a sensation that they all rallied behind. Well, here's the part where it's controversial. Mayor Testerman was married to a lady named Jessie. Now, this lady was in, well, you can see, West Virginia, that's pretty good standards. Mayor Testerman was a businessman who moved out to West Virginia. He was a jeweler and an optician. He married Jessie. And, of course, Sid Hatfield married Jessie 2 weeks after Mayor Testerman's death. Now, the story on Sid's side, Mayor Testament and him were really good friends. Jesse was very friendly to Sid Hatfield. There was no kind of conspiracy to look into, and he was acquitted of all charges to do with the massacre at Mattawan. But it's a little suspicious. And Sid Hatfield, being the sheriff and a hero and marrying Jesse and running Mayor Testament's businesses that he inherited, it does look very suspicious. And Tom Feltz even tried to get Sid Hatfield and Jesse in trouble for getting married. They left to go get married 2 weeks later, and they were arrested in their hotel room before they went to the church and got married. The charges were for adultery, and they paid a $10 fine, and off they went. They got married, and that controversy was over. Now, a lot of people said, let's not look into it. It is what it is, and it was dropped. No one knows if Sid actually shot Mayor Testament. It has been a sentiment, though, to a lot of people. And then there's a lot of people that say, that's not it. False narrative. We will never know. At this point, Sid Hatfield is now a national icon, and he has to go to Washington, D.C., and he does a hearing at Washington, D.C., and it's kind of a very, kind of thing he does. Very winging it. He somehow weasels himself out. After he gets back from D.C., Tom Feltz starts designing another plan to get revenge for his brother's deaths, and he decides that he's going to start within Welch, West Virginia, to charge Sid Hatfield for some mayhem going on at the Mohawk Mine, saying that he was trying to sabotage it and cause a bunch of destruction. He was later acquitted of that. There was no actual proof he did it, but because he was a non-union businessman and was working with the company in a company-owned county, they were able to bring those charges. Now, there was a lot of safety concerns for Sid to even go to this, but he decided ultimately that they would go and they would fight out the case. Him and one of his best friends by the name of Ed Chambers. Sid and Ed Chambers decide that they are going to go and fight for their case over in Welch, West Virginia, and are followed by a name by the name of Charles Lively, who was a Baldwin Feltz operative. Sid Hatfield, leaving his guns behind knowingly with Ed Chambers and a bodyguard in behind, those two and their wives are walking up the steps of the courthouse when tragedy strikes. Charlie Lively and other Baldwin Feltz agents took their cues and they fired.
The hours stretched for years. The funerals were a chant from low class working to middle class. It was a heart pierced by the lance.
And with the death of Sid Hatfield, it began a fuse for one of the largest insurrections that's happened in U.S. history since the Civil War, the Battle of Blair Mountain.
When they took the money, when they took the freedom, when they took our symphony, here came those old boys from the hills they could never see. Take that train for the hero slain in 21. God rest his soul. So let's go. The work is far from done. They may have took his life, but not his memory. As we march from our farms for the cause, it's the Union cause in me. Well, I'm running right down